Good morning. October, I'm on a roll. Let's just do this again. Good morning. The October 7th meeting of the Evanston City Council will come to order. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Ravel, Councilmember Reed, Councilmember
Recording in
Hadakadis,
progress.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Nguyen, Councilmember Nusma,
Here.
Councilmember Burns, Sufford, and Ravel are not here yet, and Councilmember Mayor Biss, sorry.
Here. So we have a quorum present and are prepared to do our work for the morning. We'll start with public comment. We have one public commenter, so please. And sorry, the podium has been reversed, so give us one moment for a quick change of scenery, and then please come forward. You'll have 3 minutes.
All right, well, small, intimate gathering. This is nice, less intimidating. I'm Michael Mallory, and I'm from Connections for the Homeless. Some of you know me because I may spam your inboxes. Originally, I came here to beg all of you to include affordable housing as a goal and was tickled to see that on the sheet here. So thank you for making this a priority. One thing I do want to say is that I'm coming before you with a sense of urgency. I'll provide this after my public comment, but I want to share an article I read from the Wall Street Journal about the rising rates of homelessness for older adults, primarily the baby boomer population. And the article really cites that personal stories from these people are coming to homelessness because of the crazy increased rental rates that we're seeing across the nation, and Evanston is no different. So I'm here to ask, in your goal setting for today, please think about leaving a legacy, an evergreen type of goal where this council can leave a mark for years to come about increasing affordable housing here in Evanston. The reason being is a considerable amount of the population is suffering from a cost burden for their price of housing compared to their income ratios. So all of you can make some change here to increase that. Some of you may not know I've spent a majority of my career as a leader in permanent supportive housing at Heartland Alliance, and I maintained over 200 units of housing. Over the steady years in the last 5 years, it became increasingly more difficult to locate affordable housing for our subsidy recipients, primarily due to the cost of rent outpricing our budget and fair market rates that HUD makes us abide by. So with that, I'm seeing this here at Connections too. With our affordable housing subsidies, we're being outpriced in this region in northern Cook County and may have to displace folks to different regions, meaning sending them away from families, their communities, an area they love, which is Evanston. So please consider thinking about increasing the number of affordable housing units in this goal. Continue the hard work with the equitable zoning project that you're all going to be taking on. And consider the impact to the community if we continue to outprice people in this area. If we do, Evanston's at risk of losing what it is that makes Evanston such a special community. So thank you all for the work that you're doing, and I look forward to seeing what comes of this goal. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. That concludes public comment. Would please add Council Members Kelly and Ravel to the roll. This brings us now to call of the wards. Councilmember Ravel. No report. Councilmember Reed.
No report. May I ask
Is that
a
a no report but?
I am curious. I don't know if this is an opportunity. I don't know what the order of things is, and if we are going to break into the breakout tables, and this is an opportunity to speak to the whole group.
No, this is call of the wards.
No report.
Councilmember Hadakadis.
No report.
Councilmember Kelly.
No report.
Councilmember Harris.
No report.
Councilmember Nguyen. No report. Councilmember Nusma.
No report.
All right, that concludes call of the wards. So we now move on to the main event of the morning, the city council goal planning session. So just to kind of recapitulate, because it's been a minute, we had several sessions earlier that resulted in narrowing goals down to the 6 that you see before you on this sheet: economic development, sustainability, public safety, finance, affordable housing, and public health. The direction to staff was then to take those broad categories and establish for our consideration draft measurable goals for that can guide our work and the organization's work for the next couple of years. What we have in front of us now are drafts of that. What I would hope that we can do is, during the course of the morning, go through these, raise any questions we have. I think essentially all of senior staff is on standby to address questions that we might have, make any needed changes, and then accept a potentially edited version of this that we can use to guide our work and also staff's work going forward. The recommendation was made that we, rather than sit up here in this kind of formal, eye contact free way, that we kind of repair to the area over there and sit together so that we can be more collaborative. So with everyone's, if everyone's comfortable with that plan, I would recommend that in a moment we just head over there and begin working through these goals. Before we do that, does anyone have any kind of questions or points they want to raise up here? Councilmember Reed.
Yeah. One, I forgot my glasses today, so I can't make eye contact with anybody, no matter where we sit. But I do think there is a value to, we're a small enough body to all of us just working together, and instead of splintering into several groups, could be more productive. I do just want to say that looking at the sub-goals, the big header goals, great. I agree with. There's one missing that I'd like to see, which is infrastructure, but we made our determination. But when I look at, for example, I'll just pick one out, public safety, for example. And, there are sub-goals that to decrease catalytic converter thefts by 10%, or fill 95% or more sworn officer positions by the end of 2024. I don't feel like those are council goals. I feel like those are department goals. That's what the department should be doing. But I don't know what this body up here is going to do specifically to decrease catalytic converter thefts. Or, as long as we have allocated the funding to the department, it's then not on us to fill the vacancies. It's on the staff to fill the vacancies. So I would like to see us hone in the goals so they are actual council goals rather than department goals. And I do think there is some value to, maybe if there is a kind of bifurcated goal set where one were council goals and one were department goals, great. But what we're doing here today is council goals, and I just really like to see us focus on what this body, this legislative and appropriative, if that's a word, body can do.
Thank you. I agree that we're in an open meeting. We have the opportunity to work together. I think it's productive to work together. I don't know that we would need to be over there and break into separate discussion groups. I just think it's easier to have a more free-flowing conversation in that physical environment. But if folks want to stay up here, that's fine. Again, my recommendation would be just to head over there because, again, I think it'll be a little bit more collaborative in feel. But does anyone else want to weigh in on that question? Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just clarify really quickly that the intent is not to break out into groups. It's just to physically sit over there and talk in a large group anyway, just so we can look at each other a little bit more easily. And there's not a plan to have you splinter off if that changes your recommendation.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be easier to discuss in more proximity.
All right, so with that, let's head down there. And again, we're still in an open meeting. We're still all working together, and I look forward to the conversation.
Do you want to try these? They're readers. Should we push tables together? I'm just thinking.
All right, so the first thing we hope might be quite quick, and that is the first two items on our list are sustainability and resiliency, and then economic development. And you all, along with staff, have spent a lot of time and a lot of hard work putting together goals and timelines and lots of specifics around these things. And so instead of enumerating those yet again, we hoped that maybe we could say for sustainability and resiliency that we could just turn to CARP, because that's something that you all have approved. And same thing with economic development, the Thrives report. Councilmember Reed. Then Councilmember Ravel will be next.
Yes. I think that is a good path forward, although I think it would be, I mean, we've got a year and, a couple months left in this term. If we were to pluck a few things from CARP or economic development that we actually believe or set a goal of achieving 5 things from the punch list or whatever it is, I think that'd be more useful. I want everything to have a metric so we know if we succeeded. If it's just continue with the Thrives or continue with CARP, did we do good at the end of the term or did we not do good?
I guess because both of those have metrics and timelines attached to them. So like if you, Kara is on, by the way, and she can speak to this, and Councilmember Ravel, I'll call you in just a second, that she, you know, she's got a list of like, this is going to happen in this month, and these are the numbers attached to it. So we can pull out what happens by the end of 2025, but again, I think we've already kind of approved those. Go ahead, Councilmember Ravel.
Well, every year, the council approves a climate action agenda, and I would think that would be more specific than saying CARP goals. So, and we might even want to say fund and implement, or, you know, because I think the big challenge to us is providing enough funding so that those climate action agenda goals can be achieved.
Councilmember Newsom.
I'll second what Councilmember Ravel just said. I think the commitment to council should be to continue on an annual basis, you know, approve that year's or that eco year's set of CARP goals and commit to doing the funding that it takes. And we've got kind of a separate process with a lot of engagement, including staff, including the Environment Board, including the public, you know, kind of an infrastructure that is developed to feed that on an annual basis. So just kind of a commitment to continue to doing that process is what I would be looking for here.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yeah,
I want to talk about economic development too. If we're going to do CARP first, we can come over. We can go
Okay,
back
let's
there.
do CARP first, and then you
I'll
wanted to.
comment. I agree with the
Okay.
comments made regarding CARP, that we should have some specifics for the public, and then I wanted to address economic development.
Okay. CARP? Yes. Okay, please, go ahead.
I don't recall every year this term passing and I don't recall seeing the outcome of those goals. So what are our 2023, 2024 goals?
Let's call on Kara. She's, because every year she's.
Yeah, we've done this now twice. At the second council meeting in April, we've passed or approved the very specific set of objectives for the following 12 months.
And at that point, she gives an update on what happened the
Yeah.
year before.
And also part of this process is a 6-month review, so that's going to be coming up later this month.
Kara?
Good morning, everyone. So I think what you're referring to is the 2023 CARP action agenda and the 2024 CARP action agenda. So as the council members have said, we have a draft version of the 2024 action agenda that we have been working on with department directors. The next step is to meet with each one of you individually to go through that list and then to also discuss it at the Environment Board. And the plan is to bring that to City Council on November 13th is the date that we have in mind for that.
Well, then, you know, I feel, one, that's not every year, but unless there was a 2022, which I did not hear. And so I'm curious to see.
Yes, there is a 2022 action agenda as well.
Okay. Okay. I'm curious to see the update on that, but if that's the case and we're just going with continuing this action agenda, or implementing the action agenda, it seems that CARP kind of fits into the same category that we put equity in, which was overreaching, or not overreaching, overarching. And I still on CARP, but I do think that we should potentially switch out CARP for infrastructure. I think that's where we don't have the strongest annual goals. And it's not because I'm committed to CARP as well. I just think if this is what we're doing, if we have this annual plan and we've been following it and meeting the goals every year, I don't know if we need to add it here.
Well, I would say we have to have it on this list because this signals our priorities, what we're going to commit to providing adequate funding for. And because, I mean, up until just a few months ago, we only had Kara doing all the work. Luckily, now she has two team members who are also helping work on some key issues. But if we don't have CARP on here, I think that diminishes our visible commitment to that topic.
So with regard to the 2023 action goals and those metrics, those were all met? I'm sorry, 2022, pardon me. Were the 2022 action goals, did we meet those, and where would I find those? Are there metrics?
I can circulate the 2022 action agenda, and that report on the degree to which we met those goals would have been provided in April of this year. So if you watch back the April, I think it was 24th council meeting, that's where I reported on the 2022 goals. And then also there's an October meeting in 2022 where I gave an update on that. So typically I present in April and October each year. This year we're doing it in November just because of some staffing issues.
Great, thank you. So, but those can't, like if somebody, a resident wanted to see if we were meeting our CARP action agenda for 22, would that be accessible online? Like to see what our goals were, our action agenda? I mean, is that something, or is that, I mean, I'm just thinking as we go forward, it would be nice. We're working on that? Okay. So I would say the same thing, we should shoot for 24, that action agenda, and specify it with metrics that we, the public can see.
So with the appropriate changes, are we comfortable accepting the CARP goal as resolved and moving on to economic development? I think we're proposing to not just say continue with CARP implementation plans, which, by the way, I think the implication was exactly to continue to annually establish and then carry out an action agenda, but in fact, to just say that. So it would say establish an annual CARP implementation action agenda and do it. So that's. Great. So then I think there were some comments on economic development. Certainly, council members Newsman and Kelly mentioned they had comments.
And we can let Kara go, correct? We're good?
Can Kara send out the 2022?
So Kara, thanks for being available for this conversation. If you have a second to just email around the kind of links to the various packets that had the previous year's action agendas and reports, I think some folks here just want to kind of be reminded of the action that we've taken on that. And with that, I think we're moving on beyond CARP. So thanks for your time this morning.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thank you. So my comments are similar to those made regarding CARP for economic development. I don't think just saying continue with Thrives. Thrives is more of a tool that we use, and I think we really should specify again, for our residents, what are measurements and metrics that we can then assess, like decrease vacant storefronts by a certain percent. Those sort of concrete things, even if it's large, the overall Thrives recommendations are large. I think we really need to specify something that we can measure, such as, something that directly involves and impacts the revitalization of our business districts. So, for example, like that, decreasing vacant storefronts.
Took the words out of my mouth. I think Thrive stays on the list. Thrives is really important. Thrives is one means to an end of increased economic vibrancy in town. But Thrives is more geared towards placemaking and drawing folks in, but to have a metric tied to building vacancies, office vacancies, I'm not sure exactly what the appropriate metric would be, but I'd like to see something quantifiable like that. Because we can certainly measure our progress as we accomplish Thrive's objectives, we can check those off the box. But but in and of themselves, that Thrives is not going to directly drive economic vibrancy. Don't misinterpret what I'm saying. Thrives is part of the plan, but we could have the nicest street signs and planters and still not have a vibrant economy. So I'd like to tie the metrics to the actual objective, which is, economic life of the city. We might consider adding something that is tracking sales tax revenue but I would be hesitant of setting the, kind of false objective of let's just meet that by increasing sales tax. So we'd have to make sure we're careful about how we elucidate that goal. I'd also like to see something probably in this category about special events, which in and of themselves are not economic drivers, but maybe special events falls under Thrives. So it might not have to be called out separately, but I would like to see an increased emphasis on arts and entertainment, and it might be worth calling that out separately from Thrives.
So I think before we move on, I see Paul is in the Zoom. Sorry, Councilmember Reed. I think it'd be helpful to hear from Paul about this because I think what's being asked is pretty significant. So I'd want to figure out quickly if that's something that we could do this morning or not. Paul?
Thank you. I am sitting in a vehicle on Bluetooth, so please confirm you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Thank you. So yes, I mean, the actual collecting data and presenting it is quite easy. We can demonstrate changes in sales tax, hopefully decreases in vacancy. I would warn that we think about this carefully in terms of, do we take credit for it or take responsibility for things that really the private market drives? But we definitely need to measure those things because those are the only things that we can really compare year to year. And we did present to the Economic Development Committee over the summer a Placer.ai data set. And as we move forward with some of these events, as Councilmember Newsma mentioned, we can certainly demonstrate how many people visited or what intensity of those visits are. Maybe it's like if you remember the maps, they were like red zones and blue zones, things like that. If economic development staff is going to be held accountable for vacancy rates, or anybody on the city staff, that goes into a bit of a dicey territory just because we can't control necessarily what landlords do. We've had these discussions in the past, but again, those are all kind of good starting points. What questions do you have?
Councilmember Reed.
Yeah. So to the point that you just made about staff being held accountable, that's why I firmly believe these need to be council goals that hold us accountable and aren't making staff feel as though they are accountable to doing something. It's meant to be a self-reflection or meant to tell us what to do. But I would agree with my colleagues that I do think that some clear metrics, whether it be increasing the sales tax base or, looking at unemployment numbers. And again, I get Paul's point about, well, there are things that aren't directly controlled by the city and that the private market does. If I can, on this topic, but take us back to CARP for 1 second. Similar here, I look at the CARP goals, the 2023 action agenda, and many of these aren't council goals. These are, and they don't have clear metrics tied to them. Continue street light LED conversion, and the same thing that Councilmember Newsma mentioned with the Evanston Thrives. So I don't know if I personally am ready to support either one of these as goals. Is this going to come to council at a future date for actual adoption, or are we adopting these goals here today?
We could do either one.
I would encourage us to not adopt today, and maybe there's a group of whatever council members want to join, and we work on setting actual council goals between now and whatever council meeting in a week or two, and come back with some concrete, measurable goals for the council.
Councilmember Reed, can I ask, can you, just so that I can understand, can you give an example of what a council goal would be versus a staff goal for any?
So, for example, I think a good council goal, looking at finance, for example, is, and not that I agree with this one particularly, but maintain a general fund reserve balance.
I just want to, I want to ask a more pointed version of Allison's question. There are council actions, like, for example, one goal for CARP could be pass an ordinance phasing out natural gas for new construction. Those are straightforwardly council goals. It's like, do a thing up there. Anything else that's a metric of something that happens in the world is going to ultimately reflect, I think Allison is suggesting, on both staff and council. If it's a storefront vacancy rate, if it's unemployment, if it's total emissions, all of that is going to be some sort of mix of stuff we do up there and the way that actions are carried out by staff. And so I think the question is, for stuff like that, that's like a metric of stuff happening out in the world, how do you establish those in ways that are truly only a reflection of council and not staff?
That is a good question. I don't know off the top of my head now, but what I can say is you mentioned a solid council goal. I think maintain a general fund reserve balance of 20% by 2025 is something that clearly the council has firmly within their control. And so I think it should really be intentional about making sure that these are clear council goals. And so maybe for carpets, allocate an additional, if staff determines that it's going to take $5 million to meet the goals, then it's find $5 million to support our CARP objectives. If economic development says to implement, some of the Evanston Thrives initiatives, or to create new initiatives that will encourage a reduction in vacancies, we'll take, again, I'll just throw out $5 million. The goal would be, allocate $5 million to the new goals. We have, or create a legal regime that would encourage that. If our goal is to reduce unemployment locally, maybe a policy that encourages folks to hire locally could be something we could do to achieve that goal. And so that's what I'm looking for, clear council goals.
Councilmember Kelly and then Nusma.
That's okay. Yeah, so I agree. I think many of the goals interface with between council and staff. And so, for example, but I think they have to be meaningful for the public so that we actually have metrics and measurements, so it's not vague. So, for example, saying to decrease empty storefronts by, say, 30% by the end of whatever year, that will, to Paul's point, there are market forces, but there's also policy. So together we would have to figure out what can we do to achieve that. So I think it is really important to have those concrete metrics that we can say, we did it, or we got this close, we got 90% there. That's, for this to be meaningful at all, we have to have that. I also think there's something about maybe a metric with regard to overall perception of our business districts, with regard to attractiveness and well-being in our business districts. And I think that could be demonstrated, for example, from a pre and post survey of the public, to see if the public is feeling overall better about it, if we have, made improvements in those areas with regard to our business districts. So I think to Daniel's point that these two, staff and council, much of this is about working together. Thank you.
I would like to leave this meeting with the formal approval of our high-level goals. These are our priorities. These are city council goals. These are city goals. These are our priorities for the next year and a half. I'm prepared to maybe punt on the discussion of the sub-goals, but I think it's really important that we at least finalize the discussion about setting our high-level priorities. I don't really look at this as our legislative agenda. And so I'm flexible with what goes under the metrics for these goals. Some of them will be legislative, or could be legislative. Some of them could be staff level, policy driven. But I think the main benefit of this entire discussion is to agree on our, like we're saying, top 6 priorities. And that helps steer us, it helps steer staff.
Well, I think we can all agree to do that.
Paul?
Mr. Mayor, I didn't mean to interrupt.
First of all, let's add Councilmember Burns to the roll. So I'll just be really quick. So first of all, I think we can agree to do that. I sort of thought we'd done that at the last meeting, but if not, let's do it today. I'm a little anxious. I'm hearing a lot of different things. They're zooming off in a lot of different directions. There's a lot of, I think, good, productive feedback that is going to be hard to corral into a coherent place. So just sort of thinking on the fly, this may be a terrible idea. I have many of those. But I think it might be productive to sort of continue going through the categories, hearing feedback both about the specifics and the sort of like type and style of some of these bullets, and then to Councilmember Newsom's point, to then approve the 6 and then ask staff, based upon the discussion that's gone on, to refine and perhaps somewhat reorient what's under these for a future conversation. Because I don't think we're going to do like a teamwork editing thing that's going to get us anywhere good. How does that course of action sound? Councilmember Reed?
Sounds good, although I think the only edit that I would make is that, as I stated earlier, I think the council needs to be, I don't think we should just turn it over to staff and have staff come back with goals. I think that there should be, whoever wants to be involved with it, a group that gets together and meets with staff to actually set the goals, rather than just turning it over to staff bringing back something that a majority of us aren't comfortable with, or whatever the case may be, and then we punt again. So I think what we've shown as council needs to be involved in.
So I think if 3 people or fewer want to sign up for that, that's a thing that we could do. I understand. I understand one of the people who would sign up. Councilmember Revelle.
We could assign each topic to an existing committee, so the Economic Development Committee could work on coming up with what the sub-goals would be for economic development. And we need staff input. I mean, we'd be picking numbers out of the air this morning if we said,
Exactly.
Reduce storefront vacancy by whatever % we need. So I guess I would like to suggest that Economic Development Committee work on what would the specifics be there. Not sure who public safety would be, but there must be some committee. Human Services, oh great.
I mean, but can I just?
Sure.
I think your "oh great" is actually reflective of a broader question, which is like, how do we strike a balance between getting this right and overcomplicating it? And I don't want to overcomplicate it because at some point we want to spend more energy on doing the work. Councilmember Burns and then Kelly.
Yeah, and I tuned in online, so I think I'm pretty much caught up. But I've said this before in different ways, but for whatever reason, it seems like sometimes we're resistant to doing something that in my life has always worked, which is allowing a group of people, a larger group of people in most cases, space and over time the ability to develop meaningful ideas and suggestions and recommendations. And that's why I like either one of those versions, either, council convenes and figures it out, or I do also like the committee idea as well. I think we definitely need to do one of those because for whatever reason, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves with 1 meeting, 2 meetings, 3 meetings, try to figure this out on the fly. And I don't think that's going to work. And even if it does, I don't think it's going to reflect, whatever the level of detail is. I don't think it's going to reflect what we really want out of this process. And so I was going to say something else, but now that we have some actual suggestions out there on the table, I would support any one of those.
I think we're approaching the point of overcomplicating this, so I'm going to advocate for something simple.
Sorry, Councilmember Kelly was in line. I messed up there.
Thanks. So just to reinforce, I think, again, this has to be meaningful and not just an exercise in talking about our goals. And I think if you look back over the years with council goals, sometimes it looks like they just weren't even referenced throughout terms. So I do think the metrics, even if we only had 1 or 2 really specific goals with measurements so that the public can see, I think that would be significant. I mean, we always care about economic development, CARP, finance. I mean, these are really broad. So again, I think to make this a meaningful exercise and for the public, for our residents and for our city, I think we have to have something absolutely that's available to the public in terms of measurements to say that we met it or we didn't or we got close.
I think if it'd been earlier in the process, it would have made sense for it to go to committee, but I think is not to continue to overcomplicate this. I think just a small group of council members who have the flexibility to meet a few times over the next couple of weeks with staff, working with staff to develop actual measurable goals would be the most efficient way at this point to move forward.
I do want to just in the spirit of avoiding throwing out the baby with the bathwater, I do want to stress that there's a lot of measurable goals on this piece of paper. I agree that some of them are a little less measurable than others, but like if you look at finance, like they're extremely measurable. If you look at of the 5 bullets in public safety, the majority of them are very, very measurable. The same is true on the backside. So I think the question about how to tease out what is staff's job and what is council's job is a valid and important question. I think the observations about the difference between just sort of saying continue with the Evans and Thrives implementation versus pulling out some specifics is well taken. But I don't look at this and say like, well, clearly we ought to throw this out and start from scratch. I think that would be a waste of some actual valuable work that went into this. Councilmember Burns?
Yeah, the other thing I just want to say is, I don't think just meeting in and of itself is complicated. And if it is, if somebody could explain how that in and of itself makes something complicated. So I think we're kind of misusing that before it's appropriate. We're just saying, let's meet on a more consistent basis so we can finish this. And I think when we do, whether it's a committee or a small group of council members, we should absolutely reference everything that we've been provided up until this point. I also think, Mayor, that we should continue what we're doing today, going through each list and providing some feedback. But I don't think meeting if even if we did this in like 3 consecutive meetings and we're very intentional about providing feedback, we were more direct maybe with staff on what we were looking for, maybe that would have resulted in a different outcome. But I don't think meeting in and of itself makes this more complicated. I think we can just knock it out. I'd be happy to serve if somebody else wants to serve. I do think it's something that council should lead on. These are our council goals and priorities. So I do think it's important that we're driving this. And the last point I'll say is I don't see any. I agree. To me, I feel like some of these goals there may be council responsibility as well as staff. So I'm not necessarily uncomfortable with that. I don't need every single thing to boil down to something that we can only do as council. I think there'll be a mix. And I know Councilmember Harris.
Thank you. So I think when I'm looking at them, like, what are the actions that we can do? And so for like public safety, establish a two-way online. For us as a council, we can fund that. We can say our priority is to fund something on here that we see we want to have happen. That is within our jurisdiction to put money and energies behind public health, continue and expand. We can fund the general income pilot program. So if we go through and find the verbs of, the actions that we can do as a council, I think that will help narrow it down, because I don't want to start over. It took us too long to get here. So what actions are we going to do with these? And I just wanted to circle back and be really clear. We did say equity was going to lead, and I know this is a draft, but I expect to see language saying that equity will prevail in all of these areas. And I know this is just a draft, but I want to see that language each time we come to these so that we're clear that that doesn't get lost and misconstrued. Thank you.
Councilmember Kelly?
I thought, just to simplify this, what if each committee just came up with one measurable goal? I mean, so like finance, economic development, to keep it simple. So one feasible goal that would serve our city well, but one metric, one goal. As opposed to a committee of 3, sorting through all these various departments and areas. Just a thought.
This process has been dragging out for a couple of years. So I am in favor of drawing this process to a close as soon as we reasonably can. I think what's complicating this is the discussion of these sub-goals or metrics. And somebody who has been around longer than I can might be able to speak to this, but it's my understanding that previous city councils just focused on the top level priorities without getting into the weeds that is leading to this very interesting and illuminating discussion. So is that true? In that, and it's at that point where the discussion can get dragged out and continue to become more and more complicated rather than less complicated. So I'm going to advocate approving our top level goals and leaving it at that, at least as step one. If we want to continue working on sub goals, let's have that discussion kind of separately. But I would like to tell my constituents that this city council has finally, 2.5 years into our term, approved some goals for ourselves. And these are those 6.
That is true. In the past, we have looked at these as high-level goals with some specifics, but not the granular level of detail that we're discussing here. And because I do think that the goal is to have the goals, and the mayor is right. That, under public safety, under finance, these are very detailed, measurable things that the council can do. The council has control over. So I think I agree with Jonathan. There are many, many things that we have as goals in economic development and in CARP, and to try and put every one of those down is, I think, not a useful use of our time.
I too want to tell my constituents that we have goals, although I don't know if I really care about telling them that we have goals, but I want to tell them that we have done something, that we have achieved something that is measurable, is what I want to tell my constituents. And I think, you know, just high-level goals, I don't think that really gets us there. It doesn't, you know, I can't, it's nothing that I think we can really achieve. And I think by having more specific goals that are, you know, under these broad categories, it will help us actually, if we can agree on these things as our goals, then we should be able to achieve them and actually get them done over the next year. And so I think that is the point of the exercise, is to give us an actual roadmap as to what are we going to do in regard to public safety? What are we going to do relating to CARP or economic development over the next year and a half? And without actual goals, as my great-grandmother might say, we're going to be running around like, that's kind of a violent metaphor, with like chickens without their heads. And so, yeah, I would advocate that we get specific goals here and move forward with that.
So I would say, it sounds like we're kind of split on this. I would go with just those headings and eliminate everything below it and call it a day. I really don't think, unless we're going to do something really with metrics, it's just not meaningful for us to sit here and talk in, you know, about what we want and what we don't want and who's going to do it. I just say we go with, just eliminate the bullet points, go with the headings, and wrap up. That's what I would propose. But I would want to eliminate it because I do have concerns about some of the things listed under there, and since we don't want to get into a big, you know, lot of discussion. Otherwise, I would say the public deserves metrics, clear metrics with we're going to hit this amount or this much, and this is how we're going to measure it. Otherwise, I think we should wrap up.
I guess a question for staff, if just to use economic development as an example, is Paul, are you still with us?
I am still here.
What do you feel about the Economic Development Committee becoming a venue where we try to identify, it's been called sub-goals or objectives for economic development in this example?
I believe that there are kind of a finite set of measurements or metrics that we should be tracking anyway. I'm wanting to just warn us again that, and I'm not worried about staff being held accountable. I'm just worried about setting the expectation that the city has control over some market forces. We can tame it on the edges, but we can certainly, for example, we want to implement events in downtown, and we're going to come to the council. Remember, we have this priority tool that we created. We have top 10 goals, right? We can, and I promise I'll be very quick. When we acquire placemaking equipment, we should be doing that with the goal of attracting more customers to drive additional sales tax. So we want to measure sales tax. And then over a couple-year period, we really should see vacancy rates decline as we shift into whatever our new economy is in downtown. Also waiting for office workers to come back or not. So yes, we should be challenged at the staff level at Economic Development Committee to show a clear dashboard and to define what those measurements are. I'm just concerned that if we fall short on bringing a vacancy rate down because, God forbid, there's another pandemic or some other thing, that there isn't accountability at the political or staff level. But we should be measuring the metrics that Councilmember Kelly is pointing out, no question. And we're committed to creating a new dashboard to present that.
Yes, I guess what I'm hearing there, aside from a considerable concern about vacancy rates being added, is that, you know, our economic development managers is saying that this is something that he would like the Economic Development Committee to do anyway. And so, I mean, I would feel comfortable, you know, adopting the just the headline goals, the header goals or whatever today. I still think we need objectives. I feel like I saw some landing page at some point of a previous council that not only had kind of the header goals, but also objectives. So I know that work was done. Now, whether it was done, whether staff did it on their own or did it with committee or council participation is another question, but they are there. And I think we certainly need them. The question is, how do we get there? And I believe that we have some time. Once we adopt the main goals, we should allow time, either council time or committee time is probably best, right? It's mostly a composition of council, community members, and staff. That's a perfect composition to do something like this. So I would say let's take the pressure off ourselves of trying to develop everything around our goals and priorities today, and refer some of this to either committee or a committee to get us the rest of the way. But again, I still see value in us continuing on providing some feedback on what we have in front of us today.
Thank you. I'm fine with that. I mean, ultimately, this body is going to make all of the decisions anyhow. So if we just want to adopt these headlines, I will say that, one person's view of public safety, if we just have that as a headline, not that anybody here has said this, but, there could be a council member who believes that increasing public safety is defunding our police department and having some alternative. There could be someone else who thinks that public safety is putting more police officers on the street. And if we don't have a clear goal that we've adopted, I think we're not going to be moving correctly. But I think at this point, I think it seems that there's enough support to just adopt the headlines. And so we should maybe think about where things are going. I mean, economic development, obviously going to Economic Development Committee. CARP, there's only one council member on the Environment Board.
I think we're good with the discussion we had earlier. Have that infrastructure built in place, and that comes to council every year. I think we're good with CARP, with the discussion we had earlier. We have the practice that is hopefully going to be baked in perpetuity of approving an annual CARP implementation plan. So I think we're good with CARP in that. Yeah. I mean, Finance and Budget Committee would be the appropriate place to develop some financial, kind of sub-goals.
Is HCDC the place for affordable housing? Is Juan here? Where's Juan?
It seems like a reasonable place, and then which leaves public health and public safety.
Human services, I guess.
Human services is different than those other committees in that human services is only council members.
Correct.
And less of a working group kind of tradition than the other committees are.
Would the Social Services Committee be the group to take one, like public health? I don't know, or?
I'm on Social Services Committee, so is Councilmember Burns. I don't think so.
Okay.
But
So I'd like to suggest that we change it from city council goals to another word, because truly, if we really can't measure something, it's not a goal if we say public safety, if we say finance. So can we just say like focus? Well, no, because priority finance. Yeah, I think we should say focus. I mean, it really should be something measurable if we're going to call them goals. And I'm fine with just, finishing off with these headlines, but if we're going to talk right now, we'll be here all day if we start trying to figure out what we want to, and we should have. I continue to think the public deserves measurable goals with metrics that we can, but I don't think that's going to happen here. So I would just ask that we change it from goals to.
So we have staff that are online, some of which are out of town or traveling. So I just wonder, I think we had solidified CARP. Are we comfortable with economic development using Evanston Thrives as the roadmap, or is that not the case?
I think, based on where this conversation is at this time, it's not particularly great use of staff time on a Saturday morning to hang out on a Zoom. I don't think it makes, and I think we're actually sort of close to a consensus, or maybe at a consensus, that we're not going to like dig in on the details. So I would recommend that you release staff. I think what we're going to do is perhaps with a very, very modest word change, accept the headlines, and then figure out where to go from there. But I don't think, Chief Stewart and Sarah and Paul need to be blowing up their weekend anymore at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Nguyen and then Reed.
I think I'm a little bit confused because these were goals that we discussed and at the last goal setting session. And I don't necessarily, I agree with these. These were things that we all talked about. And so I just adopting the top line, to me, I don't want it just to be the headings, but to me, under affordable housing, these are reasonable goals for the city council to work on. And public health, these are reasonable goals for the city to work on as well. I don't know whether we can reduce citywide smoking by that, but it's always a goal. But so, this is all good work that we did, and I don't think we don't want to throw these out. Do we? Is that what we're discussing doing?
Well, I think that is what we're discussing doing, and I'm with you on
those out?
I'm with you on this. So
Okay.
my
What?
We refer things to the committee. We would refer public safety to human services. Yeah, to me, there's nothing unique about this. What we will be doing is not throwing it out, but simply saying these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 affordable housing objectives, we're going to refer to the HCDC committee to review and, provide input. And they may come back and say, yep, these are good, and send it right to council for us to vote, or they may tweak something about it. And that's what we do all the time. So I see this as a referral.
I just would caution that I think if we go back out to committees, I think it's just going to really drag the process out. Staff is really anxious to solidify these goals and then align our work plans to these goals and get moving forward as we have 18 months left in this term. So I'm concerned about getting bogged down further. I respect your position on this. I just think we're just really anxious from a staff perspective to lock this stuff in. And a lot of this that is on paper is from all of you, or from some of you that we received feedback. We worked with staff. Allison sent out this draft long time ago to get feedback. I think we only had feedback from 3 or 4 members. We're bringing it back. We were hoping that this document is 90% done today. Obviously, we expected some changes or minor modifications, or maybe we swap one out for another, but we were hoping that this was 90% of what you were looking for today.
Yeah, just as a response to that, I think one could argue that although this is something that council should approve, that really everything we do should have some element of public input, which aside from somebody being able to provide public comment, which I think we all would agree, we've learned, if we haven't learned anything, we've learned that that's probably not the best way to engage with the community, that we're still lacking some other way to get input. And I think we have some examples of when we do it well. So I don't see just referring these, even saying one meeting for committees to review, and with the expectation that we can have something passed next month is going to set us back any more than we already are. But I agree, it is something that I would even like to see us get past soon. I think that one extra step is not going to set us back.
The only other thing I would add is there are quite a few metrics on this document. And we're happy to, if you want to add a few additional ones today, we're happy to do so. Or if 20% is not right and should be 10 or 30%, we're happy to do that too.
And I also said I'm fine to walk through it today. We spent a lot of time just talking about where this gets referred to or not. I said consistently that I would like to provide some feedback. Apologize for being late. I do have comments still about CARP in terms of whether or not CARP, to take us back there then, provided feedback. My questions around CARP are, what to me I'm most concerned about around CARP is is what are we doing around educating the community before we, as we're making these decisions, before we make these decisions, what are we doing to help subsidize some of these programs before we just move ahead with mandates? What are we doing to subsidize them? Is that a part of the action plan? And then I'm also concerned, I think those are the 2 main points. I may have some others. So if Kira is still, she's not with us, okay. So I do have questions about CARP. I have questions about all these, so we could continue and see what we can get done today, and then at the end determine what we want to do next.
Councilmember Ravel?
Well, two things. So in response to the CARP comments, when we get the proposed CARP implementation action agenda for the year, we, the council, have an opportunity to comment to make sure, for example, that there's, ample public input for various issues, or, what are we doing to provide funding to help people, comply with whatever policies are being proposed. So I think there's an opportunity, so we could say right now, fund and implement the climate action agenda for each year, but we will still have an opportunity to comment on those action agendas when they come to council. And then looking at the affordable housing goals and knowing what the HCDC agenda is for the next few months, is jam-packed as it is, I do think that, I have a couple of minor edits to it because I think just because of the realistic timeline issues, but I can't imagine that the committee would have any disagreement with what those being where our focus should be.
Allison? No. All right, Councilmember Reed?
I don't know where we're going right now, but depending on where we are, I agree with Councilmember Ravel. HCDC, for example, is a committee that has a lot on its plate already, and I don't know how much time the committee, without it being disruptive to the work that the committee has already decided to do, how much time that committee could dedicate to these goals or to sorting through the goals. I would go back to maybe it makes sense to have a committee of a few council members get together, work with staff, work with community to come up with a few goals. And again, for economic development, there are metrics that we can directly be held accountable to. For example, fund or with our procurement, increase our MWEB procurement by, I'm just throwing random numbers out, 5%, 10%. That's something we can be held accountable to. And I think those are the kind of goals that we should be looking for over the next year. That's it.
I guess I just want to sort of repeat something Councilmember Nguyen said earlier. There's a lot of that here. When I repeat something Luke said earlier, it was emailed to everybody on council. I don't remember when, I'll be honest, but not particularly recently. I'm not sure what the point of throwing it out and starting over would be. I just don't understand what that achieves. And so well, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, again, looking at the goals, looking at public safety, fill 95% or more sworn officers by the end of 24. This body has done its job already. We have provided the funding for the positions. I don't know, what are we supposed to do now to make sure that the department fills its vacancies? I don't know what the step that the council would take.
And if council doesn't like that particular
or
bullet point, then we're happy to swap it out for something else today.
Catalytic converter thefts by 10%. What is the council going to do to decrease catalytic converter thefts?
Again, if council doesn't like that particular item, then let's swap it out for a different one.
And I mean, I don't really want to get drawn into an argument about a specific bullet here, but that's a national crisis where a lot of different communities are trying a lot of different things, many of which are passed by city councils. Like there's a variety of different programs. There's a partnership with the county sheriff's office that is, that we could amp up. There's a, that's not something that it would be unusual for a city council to engage in and enact policies relative to.
And if it's too specific, we could say strive to reduce crimes, property crimes, right? If you want something that's a little more broader, and then that's a metric or sub-goal for staff underneath that item.
Just a quick, I think the main thing that is being suggested here is that should amendments be made on the fly as we're thinking of them, and then we just go with it. I think that's the only thing that we should be considering next before hopefully we jump back in and continue going through all the bullet points. And we do this all the time at council where we'll say, let's not figure this out on the fly, right? Let's share what we can in the meeting, and then let's set aside some time to like fine tune. And so I think the question is whether staff does that on their own, which I believe was suggested earlier, whether or not council participates in that at all, or whether or not a broader group of community members, council, and staff participate in that. I think that's it's. And there's nothing controversial about that.
I think
we do that all the time.
The concern is that the conversation so far has not inspired a lot of confidence that we're directionally close, which is frankly, I think, surprising and disappointing to the people who have been doing the work and checking in with council and not being redirected prior to now. And so the plan originally was exactly what you just said, like go through these, have a conversation, figure out if there's anything that needs to be tweaked so modestly that we can just do it on the fly, and figure out if there's anything that needs to be tweaked a little bit more modestly so that that could be done offline over the course of the next few weeks. But it's sort of sounding like people are wanting to zoom off in a lot of different directions from here, and that's, I think, thrown us into a little bit of crisis about now what.
I think we're close. I mean, there's some outliers. There's always going to be outliers on council, which is why we vote on things, and the consent, the five of us determine how we move forward. And I think that should, if it needs to be the case here, it should be the case. So I think we actually are close. When you tune it into what five of us are comfortable moving forward with, I think we're very close. For example, I don't necessarily need to see vacancy rates personally. I like what Paul said about visitation, though. I do think that's something that we can focus in on. I think most of the Evanston Thrives work most of the Evanston Thrives recommendations focus around placemaking, and then we also have the Placer AI data and other tools that we can use to not only understand what attracts people to certain business districts, but we can, we can track at this point, how frequently people are visiting different business cores, how long they're staying. Like there's a lot of data that we can get just through Placer AI alone. So I do think we're close because, again, I would support, focusing the economic development metrics to visitation and probably some other areas as well. So, again, to go back to my point, I don't think the right characterization for this is throwing anything out because we rarely do that. But it's what we do at council. Every meeting it's a work in progress. We start with something, and then we make amendments, we fine tune it, and then we pass a final policy. I think that's what we're doing here. We're not throwing anything out. The question is it something we want to just give back to staff, or do we want any council participation in between final adoption? But I don't think we should pass anything tonight or today. I think we should provide feedback and then maybe at our next council meeting adopt it. But I don't think it's good practice to do these things on the fly.
So I don't think that everything, I think some things are executed by staff and don't necessarily need council action for goal. I don't think everything has to be some kind of a council involvement or action. We set a goal. And also, I think we should always be thinking, like, how are we going to, what are we going to expect in terms of a report for progress at mid-year? And I think the simpler the better, each of the goals. And so, you know, again, if we can just take the top, I mean, I have some serious concerns about the one under, the points under finance. And I don't know if this is, we're going to talk about these or not, but if we aren't going to talk about each bullet point and decide to leave it here today, I'd say let's just go back with these overarching, you know, top focus or priorities, and then, you know, if we can then summarize it with a few simple, achievable, measurable goals for each, that'd be fine. But if we are going to continue on each of these, I do have comments about the finance. So I'm not sure where we're going.
We're at the point now where the perfect is becoming the enemy of the good. And I would like to, as expeditiously as possible, draw this whole process to a close so we can actually get to work on this stuff. So here's what I'm going to propose, and this is going to take a few minutes to explain, but I'm going to propose that today, right now, we make a motion and it's seconded and we vote to approve these 6 top-level goals. Let's get that behind us. And then looking at each category specifically, I'm going to go through that right now. Economic Development Committee, let's throw that, or the Economic Development Goal, let's throw that to the next meeting of EDC to kind of confirm what those goals are, and then, you know, they come back to us. CARP, I think we're done now. I'm comfortable with where we're at based on the discussion we had earlier. Public Safety, I'm not quite so sure how we handle that one, so I'm going to come back to that. The finance goals, I think, would benefit from a robust discussion at the Finance and Budget Committee. They're meeting next week. Let's put that on the agenda and knock that out and get this done. Affordable housing is HCDC. And so it would be fairly straightforward to give that to HCDC to validate, validate these sub goals. So that's the path forward for affordable housing. Public health. Yeah, so public health and public safety, I don't have at this point yet a clear vision of how to expeditiously get through these. Open to suggestions, but how does this general approach strike you?
Councilmember Reed?
Yeah, generally okay with it. So if we are going to kick this stuff to committees, then
So but let's right
discussion
now.
over? If not, I do have.
Let's approve those top 6, and then let's make productive use of our time now, and hopefully we've all done enough homework that we as a council right now can kind of weigh in on some of these areas, and that will provide some guidance and discussion points for the committees that will be taking these up.
I just want to add one thing. If we're just now adopting the 6 goals, I made a push for it before to include infrastructure. We have seen recently with discussions around CIP that really it has to be one of our top goals. And it's just one of the basic functions of government. I would encourage us to include infrastructure as well. We've got $200 million for facilities, $100 million for roads, bridges, and other infrastructure. It is a huge, outstanding issue for us.
It's also a huge financial commitment.
Could it be finance? That's what I was going to say. Could it go under finance?
It's finance.
I mean,
we only have.
think,
If
I
can just-
think,
I-
I think that the fact that we're having this conversation now, when we resolved this question 6 months ago, it's like an explanation of why this whole thing is going on the way it is.
Well, it shouldn't have taken 6 months. It should have met more
I
regularly.
think we've
move-
got to be willing to move forward and to accept decisions that we've made. Councilmember Harris?
I move for the adoption of the 6 city goals that we have listed.
I will second.
All right, so Councilmember Harris moves for adoption of the six headers. Councilmember Newsome seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Ravel? Councilmember Reed?
No.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Harris? Councilmember Nguyen? Councilmember Newsome?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns? With 6 voting in favor and 1 voting against, the motion carries, and the 6 top line items are adopted as goals. I think that Councilmember Newsome's proposal is, I don't, like, it's great, but the whole is a really important whole, the public safety and public health whole. I don't think the right answer there is to kick it to some committee, just because it would be nice if there were the right committee to kick it to. I agree with Councilmember Reed that social services isn't it. I think human services isn't it. So maybe we should focus our conversations this morning on those 2 and see how close we feel, and then use that conversation to figure out if we need a next step of that level of complexity.
So before we get there, I will make the following motion, that we refer the economic development discussion to the Economic Development Committee. We refer the finance discussion to Finance and Budget. And we approve the CARP sub-objective as we have discussed earlier today. Right. I want to.
Do you say EDC, CARP thumbs up? Sorry, EDC, CARP thumbs up, finance and budget, and HCDC? Were those 4 things all in your motion?
Maybe we'll just take them one by one. I move that we approve, I retract my previous motion. What I am now.
Hold on one second. Allison?
What?
Just
Do it all once?
We'll take
Okay.
CARP out.
EDC goes to, economic development goes to EDC. CARP we're done with. Finance goes to finance and budget. And affordable housing goes to HCDC.
A friendly amendment, if you can just refer the items to committee and then separately move to approve CARP, that would be appreciated.
I think there's going to be no votes.
There's going to be, yeah.
Okay, 2 separate motions.
Okay. So Councilmember Newsome moves to refer the economic development conversation to the Economic Development Committee, to refer to the finance recommendations to the Finance and Budget Committee, to refer the affordable housing recommendations to the Housing and Community Development Committee. And I think Councilmember Nguyen seconded. Is that right? All right. Councilmember Ravel? Aye. I'm so bad at this. Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Aye. Councilmember Harris? Aye. Councilmember Nguyen? Councilmember Newsome?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns? So 7 in favor and none voting against. Those 3 items have been referred to those 3 committees. Now your next motion.
The next motion is that we approve the CARP language as we previously did not completely define on the floor, but the general gist of which we all agreed to.
So Councilmember Newsome moves that we approve the CARP language, which is the continuing development on an annual basis of CARP action plans and the of CARP implementation action plans, as well as the execution on an annual basis of those of the action plans. Councilmember Harris, you're right, correct. Councilmember Harris, including funding of providing the needed financial support to effectuate the execution. Councilmember Harris seconds.
For discussion.
Yep. Councilmember Burns, followed by Kelly.
Okay, again, are there measurable goals with time for the year '24? Are there simple, I mean, not just, we're going to keep moving, but, okay, great.
We don't have them for 24 yet because the process.
We'll adopt them ultimately.
But I mean,
Process that.
I hope I'm not being too negative here, but I do want to stress, like, you guys have approved these annually, and I've always been really happy to see you approve them unanimously annually, and I thought that was deliberate, and so now we're just saying like thumbs up on that process, and both that we'll continue to approve those annually, and that we as a council will fund the implementation of those.
I guess the goal is that we will continue to approve the annual.
Well, I mean, there are 2023, and Councilmember Newsom did refer to what he calls the eco year. I think it's this is sort of a process that like resets every April, so we're kind of halfway through the eco year at this time. Right.
And I think as long as it would be appropriate to include like changing staff needs around implementing CARB in this action plan, as I said, funding subsidy programs, identifying opportunities to make sure that local workforce development is tied into every facet of this, then fine. But I want to make sure that that's the appropriate place to call those things out and to make sure we're funding them. And if not, then I would like to make sure those are integrated within council goals.
Councilmember Kelly?
So
I'd like
thank
a response
you, Councilmember
from
Newsman,
Luke
for
on
showing me the action plan for 2023. I would just ask that they be more measurable and concrete as opposed to just order electric vehicles. I mean, I think we really need to have goals. And we shoot for it. We get close to it. Nobody necessarily is holding anybody to getting to 100%, but we should have goals that are more measurable.
And I agree with that. I think, again, if we're saying that when this goes to council, that's the time to have that discussion, then I'm fine with that. Yeah, okay. All right.
All right, Councilmember Ravel? Aye. Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Aye. Councilmember Harris? Aye. Councilmember Nguyen? Aye. Councilmember Newsma? Aye. Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
All right, with 7 in favor and none voting against, that motion carries as well. So now I think we should talk about the public safety items. Councilmember Reed.
Yes. When I look at the 5 bullet points here under public safety, I would just need to hear more. I've mentioned the decreased catalytic converter thefts by 10%. I'd want to hear what the police department feels the council's role can be in that. And I get some of my colleagues are saying they don't all have to be council goals, although that goes back to the point of, staff not wanting to feel as though that they aren't, meeting these metrics. So establish a two-way online communication platform between EPD and the community that allows EPD to send notifications such as crime alerts, traffic alerts. I mean, we saw the new app that was rolled out. It seems like it's already done. I don't know if we need to put this on as a goal. Implement an alternative response program to address low-level nonviolent issues in 2024. Success will be measured by the portion of calls for service that are diverted to this channel. Well, what is our goal for the portion of calls that are diverted? If we just get 1%, do we celebrate because we've gotten 1%? Or, I think we, again, need a metric there. It would also be helpful to know where we are. It says, so next goal, fill 95% or more of sworn officer positions. I don't know where we are now, what percentage we're at. And is, I think, a normal vacancy rate, maybe Manager Stowe is, not in the police department, but across the city is 2 to 3%?
It's closer to 5 right now, actually.
Well, right now,
Yeah.
but in a normal year.
2 or 3, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Do you know what the vacancy is in the police department now?
Chief, do you want to weigh in on the vacancies for sworn officers as of now? Chief, I think you're muted.
My apologies. I believe I do want to weigh in on a lot of these goals we came up with months ago. And even with the app, we're proactive in trying to establish that. But I think we're talking about the goals for 2024. I know Councilmember Reed brought up we're at respectfully, but we've been working on a lot of these since we've come up with them.
Do you know what the vacancy rate is now? Are we at 90% positions filled or 94%? And maybe
You
if
have
you
to give me
just,
some time to get that number.
I think
My apologies.
I think we're probably right around 90 right
maybe
now.
our mathematician mayor, if you just give us the raw numbers, he can tell us the percentage.
I can calculate 90%, that's true.
Okay.
At one point, we were kind of bottom out in the high 80s, like around 87, 88%. And I think we're probably at 90 or a little
How many
higher than 90.
vacancies do we have now?
So at one point, we were down 19. Chief, I don't know if you know off the top of your head. At one point, we were 19 or 20 down. I'm not sure if you know as of now.
That was a few months ago. I remember that, 19. I know at the beginning of the year we were 27, 20.